I didn't know that yet, standing at my fence that morning. All I knew was there was a woman in my driveway who hadn't introduced herself, and a piece of paper in her hand that was about to start a war neither of us walked away from clean. 200 acres, just past town limits, and every inch of it earned the hard way. My prize stallion, a stubborn, one-eyed gelding named Cyclone who'd thrown 3 trainers before he let me near him, grazes in the north pasture like he owns the county. My herd's fat and healthy. My barn's paid off, and for 30 years not one homeowners association has ever had a say in how I run this place, because my land was here decades before their subdivision broke ground. Stick around, this one gets messy before it gets satisfying. The old board most left me alone. Their president before all this, a quiet guy named Walt, used to drive out most Saturdays to buy a dozen eggs off my stand. One Saturday, a few months before he stepped down, he showed up looking rougher than usual. Hadn't shaved, wasn't much for talking. I asked if he was all right. He shrugged and said the board was already lining up his replacement. Some woman named Deborah, who used to run PTA fundraising like a military operation. Going through a divorce right now, he said, counting out change for the eggs without really looking at it. Board figures that's exactly why she'll be good at this. Got nothing left to lose and needs something to run. He said it like a warning, not gossip. I didn't think much of it at the time. I should have. He didn't run for re-election that spring. Word around the fence line was the newer residents wanted someone more proactive. Walt didn't fight it. He just handed over the binder and went back to buying eggs, and I think some part of him was almost relieved. His replacement's first move as president was parking her SUV crooked across my gravel drive, like she already owned it. "Hi, new HOA president," she said, all business, holding out a clipboard like it was a badge. "Came to let you know about your outstanding balance." I thought about what Walt had said. None of it excused what came next, but it sat in the back of my mind the whole time, that she wasn't chasing me for the fun of it. She was chasing me because chasing something was the only thing keeping her steady that year. "Pretty sure you've got the wrong property," I said. She checked her clipboard without looking up. "This is the ranch on Cattleman's Pass Road?" "That's right, and I've never been part of your association. Your boundary sits 2 miles short of my gate. That map's outdated. The board voted to expand coverage. Every property on this road falls under us now. Deborah, your board can vote to annex the moon. This land isn't yours to claim." Her smile dropped. "If you won't comply, we'll pursue enforcement." "Do that," I said, "and I'll see you in court." 2 nights later, going through an old filing cabinet for my property survey, I found a 40-year-old easement agreement. A strip along my northern fence line that a previous owner had granted the county for a drainage line, decades back. I'd never touched it, never even known it existed. On paper, it technically overlapped 3 feet into what the expanded HOA map was now claiming. I called my lawyer the next morning, half convinced I was overreacting. He wasn't as reassuring as I wanted. "Give me a few days," he said. "If Deborah's side finds this before we've framed it right, she could argue there's been ambiguity about your boundary all along. And ambiguity is exactly the kind of thing that drags a case out for months, instead of getting thrown out in 20 minutes. He called back 2 days later, still cautious. Said he'd found the original county filing, but wanted a second opinion from a land use specialist before court, just in case a judge read it differently than we expected. That just in case sat with me for the better part of a week. It was the first time I understood I might actually lose this. Not because I was wrong, but because paperwork from before I was even born might make me look like I was. I didn't sleep much that week. Meanwhile, Deborah wasn't waiting around. My property got plastered. Orange stickers on the mailbox, the gate, the equipment. Red notices on every windshield. Final warning, utilities to be disconnect. My hands and I spent a full evening stripping every last one off. Box cutters in hand, working by truck headlights, because we'd lost the light by the time we finished the far pasture. I found one sticker stuck inside the chicken coop, taped to a feeder. Somebody had climbed the coop fence just to place it there. That's when it stopped feeling like a dispute and started feeling personal. The second wave was worse. Laminated signs stapled to my back fence by a man Deborah had apparently paid to trespass. I caught him mid-staple, and he nearly fell off the fence trying to explain himself. I let him go with a warning. Deborah, my lawyer told me flatly, had just handed me a harassment case with her own signature basically on it. I started documenting everything, photos, security footage, dated copies of every notice. I kept the stickers themselves in a shoebox my youngest hand labeled, half-joking, Exhibit A. Then came the final letter, a forged-looking notice claiming I'd been reported for utility theft. Court day. Deborah walked in dressed like she was headed somewhere far more important than small claims, a stack of invoices in one hand. I walked in with one thick binder and my regular boots. The judge let her talk first. She laid it out clean and rehearsed. Unpaid dues, code violations, a defiant property owner disrespecting the board's authority. I watched her hands while she talked. She kept touching the corner of her binder, over and over, like she needed to check it was still there. Did the county approve this boundary expansion? The judge asked once she'd finished. I'm sorry? The expansion the board voted on. Was there county approval? Her hand stopped moving. She glanced at her lawyer, who didn't glance back. My lawyer stood, and for a second my stomach dropped all over again, remembering that just in case. Then he laid out the easement calmly. Before Deborah's side could touch it, a drainage right-of-way from the 1980s. Zero bearing on property jurisdiction, backed by the land use specialist's written opinion. The judge nodded slowly, made a note, and looked back at Deborah like the technicality had just evaporated in front of her. 3 weeks of dread left my chest in about 4 seconds. Then came the rest. The certified map, time-stamped photos, the footage of her hired man stapling signs to my fence, a sworn statement from the utility company confirming she'd filed a false report. Deborah tried to object twice. Both times the judge simply held up a hand and kept reading. You've trespassed on private property, he said finally, not raising his voice, which somehow landed harder than shouting would have. You've engaged in harassment, filed fraudulent utility complaints, and threatened an illegal disconnection on land you had no authority over. Your claims are dismissed, but he owes nothing. You owe him. Harassment, defamation, attempted interference with utility service. He named the figure, $275,000, due within 30 days, then added something that wasn't in any script Deborah had prepared. And you'll issue the property owner a written, notarized retraction of every claim filed against him, to be entered into this county's public record. That last part mattered more to me than the money. The stickers, the fake seals, the forged notice. All of it had been designed to make me look like the guilty party to anyone driving past. Now there'd be an actual public document saying the opposite, with her name on it. Walt was in the courtroom gallery. I hadn't even noticed him come in. Afterward, outside on the steps, he just shook my hand and said, "Told you. Best part of the job is knowing where it ends." Then he asked if I still had eggs. Deborah didn't say anything on her way out. Her face wasn't smug anymore. I heard through Walt, a couple months later, that she'd stepped down from the board entirely. The retraction and the fallout in the neighborhood made the position untenable. Last he heard, she'd moved out of the subdivision altogether. I don't know if that's better or worse for her. I just know my fence line's been quiet ever since. That's the story. If you liked watching someone learn the hard way, where their authority actually ends, hit subscribe. There's more like this coming. Do you think the judge's retraction order hit harder than the money? Let me know in the comments.